Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts to get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard it here on a terrific Tuesday here on the Snake Sports Talk Show, live in Denver, Colorado, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Thanks for making us a part of your lovely evening here tonight. We're live all over the place. We're live on Roku, iHeartRadio, and all social media platforms known to man. Like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell button to keep you up to date on future and past episodes. We got a special Tuesday here for you. John Chik of Locked On Rangers is going to be joining us here in a couple minutes to be talking about the New York Rangers NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. I am excited about it. We've got only a couple games and then finally commencing the playoffs. I'm excited. Plus, the NBA playoffs are going to be underway. We've got the play-in tournament, and then we get right into the NBA action, and so it's going to be fun. But there's so much. That's what's so good about having, playoffs right up around the corner. Major League Baseball season, of course, already underway. This is probably the best time of year to really be a fan. And so I will tell you this, though, just taking a couple minutes up on it, but I love the fact that in sports, we get new information every single day. I mean, this is kind of the newest thing now. It's the new generation stuff. Information now is starting to flow up left and right, and then we get a chance to talk about it. There's more content to be made. That's what makes it so great about all of us in the sports industry. So initially, we've had information that the Arizona Coyotes, they found their spot. They were going to Scottsdale. They found the land. It's going to be a 400,000 square foot arena that's going to be built. It's going to be great. New information pops along. Oh, by the way, they just informed the players they are moving to Salt Lake City. Isn't it great that we have new information every day? Listen, as long as I've watched hockey, and more in particular, watching the Arizona Coyotes, from the time that they were Phoenix and to where they were Arizona. The Coyotes, as you know, in the last couple of years, have gotten the similar treatment that the Oakland A's are currently going through as of now. They no longer have, at the very least, an arena that could be packed up, jam-packed, and would be selling out every single night. I mean, it's just not happening. And it's nothing against the Coyotes, and neither is it against any of the Arizona fans. But if you look at the entire perspective right now, what's happening with the Coyotes is, number one, you're sharing the same arena as your fellow college campus with Arizona State. And it's not even getting that many people there. And by the way, many players who have basically played in this arena said it's too small. I can't even believe that we're even playing in this kind of, atmosphere. Unlike Madison Square Garden in New York City, unlike T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, or even if you look at Crypto Arena in Los Angeles. When you have all these other markets and big-time money market cities between Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Chicago, Dallas, New York, I mean, this is kind of just the atmosphere that you'd ask for big time. But Arizona, they haven't gotten that treatment. It's nothing against the players, nothing against the front offices. But the fact of the matter is that in the end, this isn't working out. And we knew for years when the Coyotes were basically known as the one team in hockey in the desert. When they first started this, okay, it was kind of tough. Temperatures were rising. It was kind of hard to maintain the ice, but they still managed to make it happen. They've had a couple of NHL playoff appearances, but have never been able to get over the hump to be crowned Stanley Cup champions. And so, of course, 2017 rolls around. Here comes the Vegas Golden Knights, and people are just all like, oh my God, now we've got next door neighbors in the desert between the Coyotes and the Golden Knights. But then once you started seeing their train and their level of success for as short of the seasons that it's been, I know a lot of people love talking about it, that, the Golden Knights, they love to manipulate the LTIR. Haven't you looked at how well ran their front offices has been for the last 6 years? And they've put they put their mark now in the league. Whereas for the Coyotes, they've had several years to basically figure this out. They've had real good players come in and out of this building. But since then, the track records of relevances has not been there. So, listen, I've been to Utah multiple times. I'm really surprised, though, that Utah has not had a hockey team quite this yet until now. I mean, you got the Jazz, you've got basically the same kind of climate as I live here in Colorado, where you're getting snow, it's beautiful weather, it's very much, camping, hiking season, you're getting it all there. But I think this is going to be a good thing. Now, I feel bad for Arizona fans. I feel bad for the players as well, to even having to get the news now with new information and what is going to happen now with this franchise. But I think this is kind of over. The Coyotes are basically over. This tenure in Arizona now is over, and who knows what Salt Lake City is going to now start to bring. But I will guarantee you this. Utah, it's a beautiful state, and especially if you go into Salt Lake City, or usually I tend to visit St. George, I tend to visit Cedar City. Lots of great camping areas. The people there are great. I think this is honestly going to thrive pretty well. It's unfortunate and sad that the track record of relevance has not been built in this organization. But in order to really kind of keep up with the market that we see right now, with Vegas now being on the map, Seattle now in the last couple of years, they now have basically appeared on the map. I mean, you got to kind of get with the program from here. But it's tough. And again, whether you kind of think differently between the Scottsdale mayor literally putting his hand out and stopping and saying, we're not going to give him this water source to even have this arena, regardless of it, this was never going to work out. I mean, you're looking at the A's right now. Their lease is up this year, and then they have to spend 2-3 seasons in Sacramento with the Sacramento River Cats, their stadium, which not even holds that much. They have to deal with that until Vegas is ready for them in 2028. So I just say this. It was fun when it lasted. There was great times. You've had a lot of really good clutch players all throughout the years. But a new dawn, a new era is coming to Salt Lake City. And honestly, I'd be excited about it. I'm sorry, Arizona fans, but look at it. You still got the Diamondbacks. You still got the Suns. You still got, you still got sports. And not to mention, too, you got collegiate sports. Arizona had a really good turnout all throughout March Madness. So I'd say as tough as it is, we still got sports in the desert. But in the same time, let's open up a new chapter and let's see what Salt Lake City has to offer this next couple years. All right, so joining me, he covers everything on the New York Rangers and now the President's Trophy winners, who now there's a lot on their shoulders, and so I'm excited to see what happens with the Rangers. So joining me, John Chik, Locked On Rangers. Well, John, I mean, you kind of let's start there. It is kind of tough to really kind of mesh with some of the bigger sports market. I mean, eventually this was going to end up coming up, but I mean, like I said, I mean, it was nice when it lasted because the fact of you could go and watch a hockey game in Arizona or even like for baseball games, but I don't know. I just kind of feel like this Salt Lake City move may be a good turnout for at least for this organization. Now you got to kind of start fresh, start new. How did you kind of see this kind of play out the second the news came out that we're potentially losing the Coyotes?
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that just felt kind of inevitable. I mean, when you just kind of look at everything that's happened over the last few years, and of course, the team itself hasn't had a ton of success, so that doesn't exactly help to drive attendance. But what was it, about like 8, 9, 10 years ago when they made a heck of a run through the playoffs and they were in the Western Conference Final? And I mean, their arena was rocking every night, man. Those people showed up and they were passionate and they were loud, and it's just kind of a bummer. But can I sit here and say that like I'm super surprised about it? No, I can't say that either. I will say, people, they'll make jokes about Mullet Arena and everything, and it's not a real NHL rink. And I get that, I get where that comes from. But as far as like rinks that I would have liked to have seen, that was kind of high up there because, I mean, there's not a bad seat in the house. You could be in the back row. You've got an amazing seat for an NHL hockey game. So kind of bummed I'm not going to get to do that at this point. But look, all the best to, Coyotes fans and the franchise itself, the players, and, going through this obvious transition here.
So I will say this, I mean, because the Stanley Cup playoffs have been brewing up and it's been fantastic. I'm excited to see what the playoffs are really going to be. But I want to start with as far as the start of the season. Now, I'm going to take account of this. The Rangers have fooled me this year because when I first previewed them, I thought, okay, they're moving on from Gerard Gallant, who is a very offensive, aggressive coach. And then they go and they get Peter Laviolette. I was almost like, I wasn't sure how this was going to mesh up after the tenure in Nashville and then a couple of spots. How did you really outlook, Peter Laviolette from the time that the season started and to where we are now with now the President's Trophy winners who may end up being a big-time threat in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, man, it's been some kind of a ride. And I mean, the first thing that I had to do, and I'm sure I'm not alone here among Ranger fans, but you just had to get used to the idea of Peter Laviolette is going to coach our team now. We're used to seeing him coaching these rival teams of the Rangers, the Flyers, the Caps. If you want to go way back in the day, obviously, he started with the Islanders there. But, overall, I thought it was a solid selection. It's one of those things where, okay, Peter Laviolette, of all the coaches available, he's sort of the safe choice, but I also never really thought that made it a bad choice. He's somebody that wins. Everywhere he goes, it seems like his teams do well. Maybe the Caps notwithstanding, but they've had so many injuries over the last couple of years that I don't know that anybody could have really done a whole lot better. And the thing that really encouraged me is when I went back and I looked at the 3 different rosters that he took to the Stanley Cup final over the years, he had a lot of success with some really young players, some guys that were just getting started and really developed under his watch. And in some cases, they're still playing some of these guys, and they're still having really nice NHL careers. So once I saw that, I started to feel a little bit better about it. And again, safe pick, maybe you could even say that this is kind of like a floor hire where we're at least going to be a good team. Now, did I think they would win the President's Trophy? Never say never. I didn't have them doing that. I didn't think that would happen, but I for sure thought they'd be a good team and a team that, could make some noise come this time of the year. And fingers crossed that they can just keep doing what they've been doing once the playoffs start here.
So quite a rebound compared to what last season gave the Rangers, because the fact that they were on a 7-game toe-to-toe between them and the New Jersey Devils. And again, this was a team that once they made the Eastern Conference Final, I was like, oh God, I love this offensive energy. And Igor Shesterkin, I love the fact that he's playing at an elite level as a goaltender, but at the same time, I mean, Zibanejad, between Kreider, and like many of their offensive cores, this team, now you look at in this year's playoffs, I have some real good high hopes that I think they could definitely make some serious noise in the Eastern Conference, but more in particular within the division, because with the Canes and now with the Islanders. So it's always so good when you got both New York teams in them, because you'd never kind of quite know who's going to really rise to the occasion, right? So once you look in within the division, I mean, this was kind of it was a competitive, but yet we're kind of now moving into this this shift now, because you start to look at the Penguins, you look at the Capitals. How did you kind of see like the Metropolitan really shape up for them? Because I like I said, I'm like you. I didn't even think this team was going to win this division, to be honest. I think they were going to be competitive, but they would at least be in the second spot. So how did you kind of see the Metropolitan play out?
Yeah, I thought maybe like second or third in the Metro certainly was very realistic coming into this season. Although I will say the Metro division coming into this year, I would have said no brainer. This is the best division in hockey. And when you look at how things kind of shook out this year, I don't think you can really say that that's the case anymore. There were some teams that certainly underachieved. The Islanders are going to be going to the playoffs, but when you factor in, their overtime losses with their regulation, I mean, they're a below 500 team in third place in the division. If you combine all the losses together, I've been saying for years that, because people have been quick to declare like, oh, the Caps are done, the Penguins are done, the Bruins are on the way down. And I keep saying, man, I'll believe it when I see it with all these teams. And there's actually some games going on right now with, some really big playoff implications. And the Caps could still get in, maybe the Penguins get in. And whichever of those teams makes it, among the playoff hopefuls, that's who the Rangers will be playing in the first round. But yeah, man, I mean, the Metro, I think, kind of underachieved a little bit this season, but the Rangers took care of business within their division, did a good job against their division rivals, and they earned this. There's no doubt about it.
So looking at the core of this roster, because, I mean, I know what I'm getting with Mika Zibanejad night in and night out. And then in the end, I'm getting some young faces. I mean, in the end, I think we've seen now Adam Fox really kind of come into his prime, and we've started to see more players really start to mark up. Again, in the Eastern Conference, because it's just a relatively different conference. I mean, the fact that the Bruins, they like to play hard. Toronto now has kind of found their spark, but then there's Florida that also can sometimes give team fits. So when you look at it from the conference standpoint, I mean, going into this in the first round, usually you start to see you have an established identity. And so once looking at it, I mean, the Rangers, I've seen a lot of like their first two lines, and I'm like, okay, this team's very offensively aggressive. They could also play very quality defense on top of that. So I think in the first round, it really is going to matter depending on how they really start this up, right? Because in the end, you don't want to be the kind that's going to start in the series very cold, because eventually teams are going to figure it out, and then that's where potentially upsets happen, much like we see March Madness, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the Rangers kind of have a little bit of a layoff right now, and I think there's I talked about this on my show a little bit earlier today. There's always that debate, not just in hockey, but sports in general. A football team gets a bye, or I guess now there's buys in baseball, which is ridiculous, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I mean, there's always this debate, like, are they better off? They get a little extra rest, they get to heal up for their playoff series, or are you better off just kind of hitting the ground running in the playoffs and starting right as soon as the regular season ends? I think for the Rangers, though, and I talked about this on my show, they've shown an ability. They're very good in the second game after a back-to-back. They went 11-1 in such games this season. And by that same token, they're also very good after a layoff. Their worst stretch of the season undoubtedly was basically the whole month of January. Just didn't play well, couldn't find their game. They did win their last game before the All-Star break, but they were not playing well at all going into the break. They come out of the All-Star break, they win 9 in a row, and they were off for a little more than a week. This time it's a little bit less than a week, but Peter Laviolette's a good coach, and I just think he's going to have these guys ready to go. And honestly, we as fans probably put more stock into that and overanalyze it more than the players do. I mean, I think these guys are probably ready to go, whether it's tonight, tomorrow, the next night, a week from now, whatever it might be.
Love it. So when I ended up breaking down, post-trade deadline, I mean, in the end, we've had so many moves. It was like 3-4 days of absolute craziness, but we love it. But Alex Wenberg, going to the Rangers, how did you really kind of evaluate his gameplay once he ended up getting acquired by the Rangers? Was this kind of like a solid piece that was going to help with a little bit more of the depth and more up on special teams as well?
Yeah, when they first traded for Wenberg, my thoughts there were kind of like, okay, if this is the second biggest pickup that the Rangers make at deadline season, then it's a really good deadline for this team. It's funny because I was looking at the Kraken, and man, there were like 5 or 6 different players where you could make a case that, okay, there could be something there. The Rangers might be in on this guy or that guy. Eberle was another one. But they go with Wenberg, and overall, I think he's done a nice job. You're not going to get a ton of offensive fireworks out of him, but he's centering that third line. He seems to have found some pretty good chemistry with Kako and Cooley. And even if they're not lighting up the score sheet on any given night, it does feel like when they're on the ice, man, that the puck is in the offensive zone for the entire possession. And even if no scoring chances come of that, at the very least, you're making your opponents work, you're grinding them down a little bit, and very difficult to score a goal when you're in your own side of the rink there. So yeah, so far so good for Wenberg, and a big part of the penalty kill as well.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, when you start bringing in a lot of these players, and usually, I mean, I know exactly the identity that I'm getting with most of them. Like I mentioned with Dallas, they go and get Chris Tanev. I'm like, there's defensive identity. That's how they've been because they're looking at the Western Conference. I get loads and loads of offensive scoring machines. I got to find a ways to stop that. I mean, you look at Colorado; they want to get back to the Cup so bad. And then you've got Vegas, who literally gave up nothing, but yet got 3 caliber players amongst the players they already have right now. So there's a lot that's really kind of in stake. But I think when you look at the Rangers scenario as well, do you have a particular team you feel like that this team, it might be a pretty long 7-game stretch against? Because once I see the matchups, I'm like, of the Capitals that right now, if they make it through, that's definitely going to be a team that's kind of like they've already got the tires kicked off, so they've only got like 1-2 left they're riding on. And then, that's just kind of a momentum shifter as well. So is there a particular team you're kind of skeptical about that might be a roadblock to the Rangers a little further in the playoffs?
So are we talking about just the first round here, or we're talking about the whole thing?
The whole thing.
The whole thing. Okay, so I think whoever comes out of the Atlantic might give the Rangers some trouble. It's certainly going to be a good series if the Rangers are fortunate enough to make it that far. Florida's a popular pick, and they're a team that's obviously very deep and had an amazing run last season. So that's a team that I think would be a tooth and nail kind of battle with the Rangers, and certainly you can't count out the Bruins either. I know that they kind of fell on their face in the first round last year, but be that as it may, they're back with a vengeance this year. And honestly, even Tampa, I mean, a lot of players on that team have not had a career year, but once they get in and, they're in the playoffs, they're going to be there. They do have that championship pedigree. That core is still intact. I would not be surprised at all to see Tampa make some noise in the playoffs. And you never know how it can go. I mean, that's the beauty of the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're as wide open as any tournament in sports. But yeah, I mean, Tampa, if they get knocked out in the first round, that wouldn't stun me, but if they want another run, that wouldn't surprise me either. So, just can't wait to watch these games and, see how it all unfolds.
Oh, indeed. By the time that I have the bracket out, tonight I've got my whole NBA bracket and I'm excited to showcase it with the audience and with the listeners. So it'll be interesting to see how the Stanley Cup playoffs really, really pan out. What's the latest that you've kind of heard right now revolving around Cabo Kako? Because I know he was a name that was floated around of whether do the Rangers maybe potentially trade him in the trade deadline, or is this maybe somewhere in the plan during the off season? What have you basically seen with Kako's game? And is this something that the Rangers, they're trying their best to see how this flows out, or are they going to possibly maybe make a move by the offseason with him?
Hard to say for sure. As far as trading him at this deadline, it was something that I think was at least on the table, but not something that I necessarily expected to happen. And there was somebody, and I apologize, I forget who said this on Twitter. Wish I could take credit for this take, but it's something that I'm going to repeat here because it's so spot on. Capo Caco, when the trade winds were kind of swirling and there was this idea that the Rangers might move on from him at or near the deadline, somebody tweeted out that Capo Caco is the exact player that Chris Drury would trade for at the trade deadline if he was on some other team. And that is so true because, for starters, right wing, that's kind of been the weakness of the Rangers the last couple of years. It's where they haven't had as much depth. But you also add in the fact that Capo Caco is a very defensively responsible forward. Drury likes players like that. And he does seem to have some untapped potential. It's a situation where at times he hasn't played great, but at times he's also been kind of snake bitten with injuries and not having any real stability in the lineup as far as, who his line mates might be. So I'm glad that they hung on to him. And, we'll see what happens with the salary cap in the offseason. There are rumors that it's going to be going up. So hopefully that's the case. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Capo Caco stick around. And one other point that I'll make there too, if you were to take away like the draft status of Capo Caco, obviously we know he was the number 2 overall pick. But if you just take that off the table and you just kind of look at Capo Caco, the player, and you've got somebody that's a 23-year-old forward doing the things that he does, very basically defensively elite forward and gives you some offense as well, you'd be pretty happy with that. And, Capo Caco, has he quite lived up to expectations? No, but he is an important part of this team and somebody that, is going to be important come playoff time and somebody that they can't afford to lose.
It's funny because, and it's very true, because sometimes, for some players, change of scenery is always a good thing for most of them. And sometimes you get a lot of their potential because if it didn't mesh in this organization and it'll mesh in the other, sometimes it comes from coaching schematics. It comes from just the atmosphere in the organizations. So you start to see the differences of those players. It is kind of interesting to see it because at first, and I've even heard the news where, Alexis Lafreniere, is he going to end up, hitting his spot? And then eventually now he has, and he's starting to be now more of that specialty type that's helping to keep Rangers in games. So in the goaltending aspect of it, I had a friend of mine that was asking me about this to bring up on the show. So as you know, Alexander Georgiev now as a part of the Colorado Avalanche. When you started to kind of see the goaltending situation where they moved on from Henrik Lundqvist, one of the best goaltenders you've seen in the hockey league, and then moving into they needed to find their next goaltender from there. How did you really kind of see that pan out between Georgie and then eventually panning out with Shesterkin? Because honestly, Shesterkin, I was a little bit questionable about, but once he started to get that groove, he really started to become that future goaltender for the Rangers for years to come.
Yeah, it's one of those things, what turned out to be Henrik Lundqvist last season with the Rangers, they actually had all 3 of those guys on the roster. And, there were nights where Igor would be a healthy scratch and Georgie would be a healthy scratch on different nights. But the one thing that really impressed me about Igor before he ever even got to the NHL is when you look at his numbers in the KHL and the AHL, they're just ridiculous. Like, you can't do this in a video game. His goals against average in the KHL for years was like right around 1. And, again, I realize those leagues are not the NHL, but when you're putting up those kinds of numbers at any level of hockey, it's tremendously impressive. And yeah, he might not completely replicate that in the NHL, but it got to a point where it's like, there's no way this guy, at the very least, is not going to be a very good starting goalie in the NHL. And of course, he got his chance. Georgie had been there for a couple of years too, and Igor kind of jumped him in line, so to speak. But, when you look at how everything played out and how well Igor played, it's unfortunate what happened to Georgiev, but things worked out okay for him. He got to get traded to a defending Stanley Cup champion, and, good for him. He finally gets to be a starter in this league, and he certainly deserves that. But when Igor played the way that he did with the Rangers, I don't think there was any really looking back. And as far as keeping Georgie around, they did that for 1 year, but he was an RFA, and Rangers had to go cheap at the backup goalie position because they're up against the salary cap. And again, Georgie deserved to start somewhere. I think the Rangers recognize that too. They did the deal with Colorado, and all the best to Georgie in Colorado anytime he's not playing the Rangers.
Yeah, it really is interesting because I hear a lot of Avalanche fans, there's some of them that they really do love Georgie, and the fact that if he's playing upside down on his head, out there on the ice, he's normally so fun to watch when you see him as a netminder. But then there are times where you got to be consistent, especially up on the road. And that's been one of the things that Colorado coming into this playoffs, I'm a little bit questionable of, but I'm still confident the team will basically play to the consistency of solid netminder. And then in the end, solid enough offense to where it'll get the team rolling. Two things before letting you go. So, Jacob Trouba as their captain of the Rangers. I mean, I at first when I had the acquisition, it was bound to be the perfect fit. I mean, in the end, this was moving on from Ryan McDonough at one point, and then they needed to find their next real big thing at defense. So when you look at Jacob Trouba and what he's really meant to this organization and now being the captain, I mean, what was kind of the presence you really liked about him that really sets the tone the most for the Rangers?
I think more than anything else, he's one of those guys that's just not afraid to tell it like it is. He's very honest and open when he's dealing with the media. And obviously, we don't see everything that goes on behind closed doors and what he says to his teammates and whatnot. But basically that offseason, there were three candidates to be the next Ranger captain. It was either going to be him, Mika Zibanejad, or Chris Kreider, barring something completely unexpected and unforeseen. And I think you could have gone with any of those three. But Mika and Kreider, they're BFFs, they're buddies. They've both been there a long time. I almost feel like one of them wouldn't have wanted to be the captain over the other, like, even though that sounds kind of strange. And I feel like of those three guys, the guy that, is going to be your teammate and he'll be your buddy, but he'll also, call you out and make sure that you're ready to go on a nightly basis and have the tough conversations that need to be had from time to time. To me, that's Jacob Trouba. And obviously, you see what he does on the ice. I mean, he struggled at times this season, but just a very physical player, somebody willing to, block slap shots with his face, do whatever it takes to win games. And like I said, a very accountable player. And I think they made the right choice. I think Mika and Kreider, both of them would have done fine. But yeah, I mean, Trouba, you can sometimes critique what he does on the ice, but as far as the leadership and the captaincy, I haven't really wavered on that ever. I think he does a great job in that role.
So now, with that being said, now the important question, of course, is and how you would outlook as far as from covering the Rangers for as long as you have. This winning Sir Stanley is not the easiest. It's not the easiest trophy to really hoist. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Takes a lot of grind to getting through there. But we have seen with many teams that have surprised us all. I mean, the St. Louis Blues has been the team that's surprised us. Vegas Golden Knights, they brought together and finally meshed and connected to where they won it this past year. As basically being in that front seat, as like we would see Peter Laviolette. What's kind of the game strategy? And what's the one thing like that the Rangers, in order to make it into the Stanley Cup final, let alone win it, what's kind of the strategy that you're looking at the Rangers to really kind of pivot towards if they do want to end up winning the Stanley Cup once again and bringing it back to the city of New York?
Yeah, I think just being defensively responsible, that's something that Peter Laviolette has brought to this Ranger team. They're a team that just seems to have better structure this season and, overall has done a really nice job defensively. There were too many times in the past, and I'm not putting this on any of the former Ranger coaches, I mean, maybe a little bit, but there were times in the past where the defensive strategy seemed to be, well, let's just let Igor Shesterkin save our bacon on a nightly basis. And obviously he's capable of doing that. It's nice to have a goalie of that caliber that can steal a win for you every now and then. You go through the playoff tournament, you're going to need your goalie to do that at least a couple of times. But yeah, I think defensive structure is going to be very important for the Rangers in the playoffs. They do occasionally struggle against the rush, so they're going to have to be good there. And just trust themselves that, the goals will come. The Rangers have too many talented players to not be able to put the puck in the net at least a few times. And I think paying attention to defense first, that's going to go a long way for the Rangers come playoff time here.
Now, it'll be interesting because, of course, and we have seen this with some recent teams, that ones that win the President's Trophy often have the biggest pressure on their shoulders. Are you still confident this team that even being President's Trophy winners, that they're going to go out, they're going to show out, and they are definitely going to be that tough team in the playoffs? Because, again, we've seen this with Tampa. We've seen this with, Boston. Is there kind of a little more of a pressure from winning a President's Trophy than it is of just a team that's punched their ticket in the playoffs?
Yeah, 2 years ago, as recently as then, obviously the Rangers were a young team, very inexperienced in the playoffs, and they had that nice run. And honestly, that season, I wouldn't have wanted the Rangers to be the President's Trophy winners because at the time they seemed to kind of really embrace that underdog role. You could even look at the individual playoff series that year to kind of know what I'm talking about. Most people were picking them to beat the Penguins in the first round. They go behind 3-1. They come back and win. They are down 2-0 against the Canes. They come back and win that series. And then they're playing Tampa in the conference final, and they get up 2-0. It's like, oh, man, now what do we do? And they end up losing 4 in a row and getting eliminated. I think now, though, and I've talked about this on my show, you got to embrace this. You got to embrace being the big dog in the yard at a certain point. I can understand 2 years ago this team kind of wanting to cling to that, underdog status and, let's rally together and all this stuff. But you know what? They have the best record in the NHL. They have to embrace that. They have to embrace being favorites. And I think they've gotten to a point, and Peter Laviolette has helped them in that area. I think they've gotten to a point where they do indeed embrace that, and they expect a lot out of themselves. And I mean, hey, once the playoffs start, records and seeds, I mean, does it even really matter? There's 16 teams, and again, this tournament is as wide open as any other playoff tournament in sports. So you got to bring it every single night, and I think the Rangers have all the capability in the world to do just that.
Gosh, it's going to be such an amazing playoffs, honestly. And like the last few seasons has really been, it's rose to the occasion where like I can't take my eyes off of it because, I mean, you got great matchups. You got teams that could surprisingly unexpected could end up shocking a lot of people in the hockey world. So we'll see what happens right there when the Stanley Cup playoffs start. But I'm just like you, man. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be full of different storylines and even some Cinderella stories in the middle of it. But we'll see exactly where momentum start to change up from there. John, appreciate you coming up onto the show. Where can many fellow Ranger fans find your content to get everything on the New York Rangers?
Yeah, I mean, you can find this on YouTube or anywhere you happen to be listening to the Snake Sports Talk Show. You can find it there on any audio platform. If you type in Locked On New York Rangers into basically any search engine, we will come up. And yeah, I mean, it's a daily podcast. To my knowledge, the only daily Ranger podcast in existence. We do 20 or 30 minutes every day, and then we just keep rolling. So done more than 1,000 episodes. It's a really fun, little Ranger community that we've built. And yeah, we definitely like to have a few more people join the community. And Jake, big thanks to you for having me on here, man. We'll have to do this again in the future.
Absolutely. Definitely down for it. I got to be checking in the Big Apple each time that I see that the fans are absolutely hyped up in the Garden. And look, I've heard a lot of great things. I'm definitely a traveler. I've actually walked by. I've been in New York 6 times. I have yet to really enter into the Garden, but I heard a lot of great things. The energy, the hype is so different from there. But I'm excited to see what the Rangers do by the time the puck drops in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's on, man. But appreciate you coming on by, man. Take care of yourself, and we'll see what happens with the Rangers come the playoffs.
All right, sounds good, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, I mean, the Rangers, they were always the kind of team that I was like, they've got great momentum. They've got a great offense. And at the same time, the coaching aspect was going to get there. And so I think he proves a really good point. I think maybe because for some coaching track records, like with Peter Laviolette, I think maybe he has learned a lot more of that to be much more defensively efficient. But at the same time, he's got the offense that can be in control, that could spread the puck around all around the ice, get him into better offensive formats, and then be able to execute that. Well, I mean, you're talking about 2 to 3 lines that could very much end up sparking an offense. So it'll be interesting to see how the Rangers really do play this out. But Stanley Cup playoffs, you never can go wrong up on it. It's the most exciting time of year, and I cannot wait until the 18th comes around the corner. We got a lot up on that. But first things first, of course, as we come back here from break, bottom half of the hour, my NBA playoff bracket is finally out. I think this is exactly the expectancy we might see from some teams, and we might actually see some surprises here and there, so you do not want to end up missing out on that. With that being said, folks, first and foremost, BetUS is your home for the Stanley Cup playoffs and for the NBA playoffs, with all of the best bets to choose from. Not to mention, we've had the Masters not too long ago. Congratulations to Scottie Scheffler for winning the Masters. But there's always daily contests going on on a daily basis, and you don't want to miss out on all the daily contests like what's happening now. NBA playoff action is gearing up. NHL Stanley Cup playoffs is gearing up. So get yourselves into BetUS.com with over many different betting lines to choose from. This is a betting company that has been around in business for over 30 years. They give you the best lines there available, and however you end up betting. When you put in $50 or more in your deposit, you'll get 200% bonuses with 30 risk-free bets as a way of saying thank you for choosing BetUS and trusting you with all the best lines, with all the best entertainments. Yes, they've got casino play. Entertain yourself, and at the same time, get yourself geared up for all the daily contests that are happening currently on BetUS.com. Link is in the description to sign yourself up and try out BetUS for yourself today. BetUS, where the game begins.
Snake Sports Talk Show is sponsored by Muscle Tech, with hundreds of supplements and vitamins to choose from, all packed with 100% all-natural proven ingredients. You can be sure that Muscle Tech will give you the edge and the boost to train and look like your fit and healthy best, whatever your goals are. Try Muscle Tech today and use promo code SNAKESPORTS to save 30% off your purchases.
Listen up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
Around the world of sports, jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup, then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Check out the Con Man live on the Sports Corner, coming to a screen near you, giving you the greatest stories from basketball legends you've never seen before. Sharing their glory, building the toughness, and how they show off their swag. But only one man knows all that, and that's the Con Man. Join Michael Conceição, the Con Man, at the Sports Corner, Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Getting ready for the big game and for playoffs. Well, don't lose your seat with SeatGeek as the playoffs are around the corner for both the NBA and NHL. Maybe go and get tickets from your favorite artists to get you closer into the action. Yes, many different concert venues. I've already been to one. Red Rocks was absolutely amazing. But don't lose your seat with SeatGeek. Use promo code SNAKESPORTS. Get $20 off of your first purchase of your first ticket when you use SeatGeek.com online, and also download it on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. All right. So, I will say this, and something that I definitely wanted to take the time to talk about, because the other night was a big time night for women's sports, and that was the WNBA draft. Arguably, you know what's crazy about this is that the WNBA drafts, the last two, have had only about a viewership of about 400,000 to 500,000 views. Not that many. Once Caitlin Clark, who gave you 18.7 million views in the college hoops tournament, she comes in, and like I mentioned before, that loss to South Carolina was not going to hinder her as basically being the number one overall pick. She was still going to be the top pick regardless. I know what I'm getting with her, both offensively and also on the assist and defense. Caitlin Clark is that much polarizing as an athlete. So looking at the numbers from the WNBA draft, was at 2.7 million views. A 300% skyrocket from the previous two drafts. But the other thing is it's not only just accounting for her, but you got Angel Reese, you had Camila Cardoso, you had many other great women athletes in the basketball world and in the basketball culture that came in, and they're going to take this league by storm. This is a new breed and new wave of great players, but more surrounding to Caitlin Clark. We love it when we have athletes that are just that polarizing because they're the ones that basically are the tone setters. Fans like ourselves, we feel a different way about our athletes. And Caitlin Clark, the way we felt about her is she glued us to a television. I mean, she's honestly women's basketball version of Steph Curry. And again, when Steph Curry came into this league, we didn't think he'd be that polarizing because of the fact of, one, it was his size. The other was, could he translate to being the best guard in the league? And in a league that shifted from aggressive offenses, and the physicality play was over the roof. I mean, I've grown up watching physical basketball from the Jordan era to Kobe's era to even at the time when LeBron kind of got about a quarter, if not a third, of that whole era. But since then, when it changed and it became a shooter's league, quality defense, and consistent coaching, the game changed. So Steph Curry is widely looked at one of the best shooting guards that I think that we've had ever. And in an era that was not big into shooting. I've had many conversations and many talks about this in the past, but many seem to believe that because of all the other eras, who were the players back then that could have thrived in this era? There's many of them that definitely could. If you really think about it, Michael Jordan probably would have ended up thriving in this era because, one, he was taught physical basketball, but he was absolutely a threat when it came to perimeter shots. It's like we see that with Kawhi. It's like we see this with LeBron. It's like we saw this with Kobe and multiple players. But at the same time, translating that to the three-point line is one that I think would be implemented and one that I think could very much be viewed at very differently. So Caitlin Clark now in the WNBA and as a part of the Indiana Fever. Fever fans, get geared up and get ready because you are going to enjoy watching this for years and years. I'm excited for Caitlin Clark's future. And in the end, here's what's funny about this. Only in an hour after she was drafted, jersey sales sold out. Jersey sales. I'm not dealing with that with LeBron. I mean, even though, like Tom Brady, we've had LeBron jerseys from the time in Cleveland to the time in Miami to the time in Los Angeles, because we know LeBron was arguably one of the greatest players to ever play the game amongst many of them. But I was not getting that polarizing, like I wasn't getting that push to go and buy a jersey. I wasn't getting that push to basically glue my eyes to a television because I can't get enough. You know who did that the most? MJ, Michael Jordan. Because remember, if you guys have watched the film Air, right? Remember how that was years ago when they were showcasing and they were about to launch Jordan, like Air Jordan shoes? You know how many people still today, because of the class, because of like clutch moments and unforgettable seasons and championship seasons, what Michael has meant to the game of basketball. I mean, we still wear the shoes today because not only for the comfortability, but it's so iconic. That's why, with Caitlin Clark being as polarizing as she is in now the WNBA, the fact that jersey sales sold out in the hour just tells you how impactful she really is. So to me, I love having a polarizing star because in the end, many movie heads, you guys can go into the theaters, and you love many different actors. I mean, good God, how many times have we seen Tom Cruise in multiple movies when it came to, Mission Impossibles, when it came to Top Guns? I mean, good God, Top Gun Maverick was an absolute classic. And I even watched, the original. So you look at that, you look at Keanu Reeves multiple times when we've seen The Matrix and when we see the John Wick series. I mean, you have stars that are that polarizing, that just, they're so gifted, so talented, that they get the big gigs, they get exactly the bigger roles. So I feel like Caitlin Clark has definitely moved into that realm. And she certainly has. So I think, to me personally, Caitlin Clark's future is very bright. The WNBA's future is very bright. I mean, think about it. Dawn Staley basically went out and she thanked Caitlin Clark for the fact that the views, but not only that, quality basketball for once is literally looking like this. Look, the NBA is at some point going to be in sheer trouble. I still want to be able to see my stars. I want to be able to see at least the best of the best domestic stars that are out there. Right now, it's being carried over by international stars. Nothing wrong with it, but that's what's happening. We're not getting enough domestic stars that honestly are that polarizing as Caitlin Clark, or is that as talented as Caitlin Clark. No offense, no disrespect, but they're not. This has been kind of a weak, I think honestly, this is a weak draft outside of Zach Edey. So NBA is kind of in limbo here. But when you get a lot of international stars like Luka and Jokic and Giannis and Wemby, I mean, come on, you got to get with the program here. But I think arguably there's going to be nothing like turning on a television and watching. And again, I am so happy that even with the transition of what sports has now become at this point, that now women's sports are finally starting to get the credits and they're finally starting to get the appreciations that they should. Inarguably, they should. I've grown up watching girls softball for years and watching Ginny Finch. I've watched, a few WNBA games here and there, even from the glory days of the LA Sparks to where, you had the Seattle Storm at one point and now the Aces go back to back. Now you've got the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Skies and the Connecticut Suns. You've got all these other teams all the way around. I think this is the best pivot that could ever happen for women's sports. And you know what? I'm all in for it. I mean, good God. The only time that we ever turned on women's tennis was whenever that Serena and Venus Williams was on. Serena was that damn good each time that we would watch, and she would end up earning grand slams. I mean, she was that polarizing. And by the way, Serena even mentioned about potentially wanting to own a WNBA team. Could you blame her? Women are making a come up in these days. But you know what? It's the evolution of sports. It's the best thing about sports. And again, something that may have started so small was not going to end up small for a very long time. So this age now is what's going to be so damn good to watch for like the next 5 years ahead. I am all for it. All right. So without further ado, because the NBA playoffs is now officially commencing tonight, and at least getting the timeline in, I have my NBA bracket that I cannot end up waiting to show you guys from here on. So I've got a lot to really talk about from here. So here we go, our NBA playoffs. And by the way, I will have my top 10s as well for teams each time we go into the next few rounds and when we get into the championship series. So get yourselves geared up, because here we go. We got a lot to really talk about from here. So here we go with the NBA playoff brackets here. All right. So to start us off in the West, so the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors. I'll be honest with you, I feel like Golden State still has enough in the tank with the experiences and, of course, their long track record in the playoffs. I see them defeating the Sacramento Kings. I love Domantas Sabonis and I love De'Aaron Fox, but I just think this was not the year compared to the year we had last year with the Sacramento Kings. I think they've kind of fallen back, and I think in the end, the Warriors, they're the Warriors for a reason. They're going to grind out any and every game possible in order for them to basically stay on top. So I'll take the Warriors to win that matchup against the Sacramento Kings. Now, the other matchup, however, the Lakers and the Pelicans. So to be honest with you, I think the Lakers really do shape up well against Zion and the Pelicans for a few reasons, because Anthony Davis is playing his best basketball right now. So for LeBron, he cannot end up feeling like he's the only overly reliant player. So guys have to basically step up. The thing about the Pelicans, though, is that they've always been kind of that middle of the pack type of group, but they still show spurts that they can be a tough team as well when in the trenches. However, I don't see them getting past the Lakers up onto that, but at least they get a second chance up in this, and they'll face off against Golden State in the last of the playoff in the play-in tournament, and then the Lakers face off against the Denver Nuggets in that first round. Now, in that span of the play-in tournament, now we're going to go to the Eastern Conference real fast. And so between the Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls, I'm going to take DeMar DeRozan and the Chicago Bulls. Here's the thing about it. The Atlanta Hawks right now are starting to become a little bit of a dumpster fire. I love Trey Young, and I think ultimately he's going to get moved by this offseason. Mark my words, he will get moved. Because right now, Atlanta, they need to start pushing for more rejuvenation, because in the end, I was not getting that much compared to the team that initially did kind of shock us a little in the Eastern Conference. So I think Atlanta, you're better off moving on from Trey Young at this point. I don't see them retaining him, and I think he will definitely end up getting moved. But however, for Chicago's really got to start making this worthwhile. And so I think they definitely end up beating the Hawks, and they move on to the next portion of the play-in tournament. Now, between the Sixers and the Heat, I'm taking the Sixers to win in that game because of the fact of, number one, the Heat have kind of gotten cold. So they're not quite heating up as much. However, it is doing Miami a favor because it's keeping them up and on their toes. Jimmy Butler, as you know, is a competitor that does not want to lose, and he's somebody that does not want to end up getting embarrassed in the playoffs. So I think the Sixers basically route. They go into the next round against the Knicks in the first round. But the play-in tournament is going to basically shape up to be Chicago and Miami. And you'll see exactly how this will run up here on this next slide. So, you've got the Warriors and the Pelicans, and I've got the Bulls and the Heat. Honestly, I think, and for as much as I love the Warriors and Steph Curry and many others, I think this is where the road stops with them. They're getting old. They're needing new, young, rejuvenated players. It's going to be hard to keep everybody in this building because, again, Steve Kerr, love him as a coach, but you're starting to see the age and where dynasties eventually die off very slowly. And so the Warriors, I think, are hitting that point. But I think the Pelicans, because of their roster and because of their youth, they are a team that's going to rebound back. Now, they showed spurts against the Lakers where they kind of have played a little bit of that competitive physical feel. But then as far as the Warriors, with the age that they're at, not as physically capable as they once were. But they're very, very reliant, overly reliant when it comes to shooting. I don't think that's going to honestly work for them against the Pelicans, and I have the Pelicans moving on to play out the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, Chicago and Miami. As I've said, I think Miami has kind of gotten on their toes after the loss against Philadelphia, but I think the Heat, they do rebound back. And as far as for Chicago's concerned, Chicago's going to make some moves in the offseason, but at least you got a play-in tournament win. It's something to, at the very least, kind of cap off the season, but I think Miami does rebound back. They got woken up. They're going into the playoffs, and they're going to make it into the next round of the playoffs against the Celtics. All right. Now, round one of the playoffs here. So as you see up on this, so let's start with the Western Conference between the Thunder and the Pelicans. I've got the Oklahoma City Thunder beating the Pelicans potentially by 6 games. And I think one of the parts is you've got a healthy Chet Holmgren. SGA, by the way, has been such a phenomenal star that I think the Thunder now are starting to basically get comfortable in their own. And at least they're facing off a team that they match up very, very well with. And I like the fact that the Thunder, they're doing everything that they possibly can, spreading the ball, get important shots within the perimeter and the threes, but at the same time, it's the defense and the assist calipers that right now is kind of the big benefactor for the Thunder. Now, Clippers and the Mavericks. People are going to hate me for this. And as much as I was loving the Clippers up to this point. But when are we going to honestly start to really be honest about the whole Kawhi Leonard health thing and all the rest of it? I just think this is honestly not going to go well. And I think this might turn into a 7-game series between the Clippers and the Mavs. But I just think Luka Doncic has really caught fire, and he knows, and as far as being in a playoff atmosphere, he's going to take the game into his hands. But I think the Mavericks are going to be in a position whereas they play situationally. Now, when they got P.J. Washington, that is another one of their real good shooters that they've been able to utilize on the floor. I think the Mavs really do upset the Clippers in this one, and they move on, and they're going to play OKC. Now, Minnesota and Phoenix, by the way. As much as I love Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves, I just think that there are still a few things that need to be fixed up. But I do think the Phoenix Suns, for as much as I'm rolling the dice on them, kind of moving forward, I think the Suns win this series in 6. So in the end, love their core. And I think Bradley Beal is finally starting to come alive now late in the season. So I like how this is shaping up. So I think the Suns end up beating the Timberwolves in 6, and they move on. And then as far as for the Nuggets and the Lakers, do I really need to say more? the Lakers are just an odd matchup against Jokic and the Nuggets. And honestly, I don't see them getting past the Nuggets. I think that the Nuggets really have found their own, and they're very much basing themselves where they need to be. So I have the Nuggets moving on. So we got the Thunder and the Mavs, Suns and the Nuggets. Now in the Eastern Conference, Celtics Heat. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I like the Heat, but inconsistency sometimes does play in a role. And I think for the Celtics, not going to be easy, but I have them taking it at 6 and moving on. I just think because the way that the defense and the offense is set right now for the Celtics in the Eastern Conference, it's just put together very, very nicely for the Celtics to really kind of make a real good deep run. So I think the Celtics, they make it in and they go into the next round. But here's what's going to be interesting about this. Cleveland and Orlando, both are young teams. Who are you taking more? Pablo Banchero, or are you taking Donovan Mitchell? Honestly, the way things have played for the Magic, and I think this will be an interesting one, but I have them winning this series in 6 because the Magic have actually been a really good team. They've produced very, very well on the assist machine. They've also have produced very, very well on quality offensive percentages, especially from the free throw line. That's important when you need that. So I think the Magic, they move on. And they'll face off against Boston in the second round. Milwaukee and Indiana. Milwaukee is looking like a mess. And as far as for Giannis's health, they are saying that he may be good to go for game 1 against the Indiana Pacers, but there's uncertainty because there's pressure in the building. I'm not entirely sure about Milwaukee, but I think you're going to get a 7-game series because, to be honest with you, Indiana is going to give you fits. They've got a great bench. I think Tyrese Halliburton has really found his groove, and he has very much put himself in the high position to play at the high level. So the Pacers are going to be very interesting, and I'd watch for them to be in the upset alert, but I think they upset the Bucks, honestly, and I don't think the Bucks get further and further out. I just think right now with the dramas with Giannis and everybody in that building in Milwaukee, things aren't going to be shaping up good. And then finally, the Knicks and the Sixers. People were surprised about this, but I honestly have the Sixers taking this game in 7 games because I love Jalen Brunson. And I think I just think the problem is that Jalen Brunson deserves to have a star next to him. And I don't think New York quite has that yet, even though I love OG Anunoby and I love a couple of their really good players on their situational style. But I just think right now with the Sixers, with Tyrese Maxey, and you're getting a healthy Joel Embiid back, those defensive spots are going to be too much for the Knicks to have to handle. So I got the Sixers moving on. So I've got Celtics, Magic, and then the Pacers, Sixers in the second round. Here we go now. Now, this is what's going to be interesting for going into the conference. Now, I have the Thunder and the Mavs, and honestly, for as much depth and capability, I think this is where the Mavericks kind of slow down at, because the Thunder, they're going to tire you out. They're going to definitely, they're going to be outpassing the Mavs because eventually they're going to be starting to open up the floor a little bit more, and I think that's where the Mavs kind of struggle with it, with defensively, because they're not a great defensive team, even though they were able to play up to right now the Clippers slowing down. But I think they're going to get wore out by this young Thunder team, and at the same time, they're going to have to get themselves in better positions. I don't think they can. I think this will be a 6-game series between them and the Thunder, and Thunder move on to the Western Conference Final. Now, Phoenix and Denver. Phoenix has been too inconsistent in so many different spots, and it's not even close. So I think with Denver, I know what I'm going to get with them, even though with a lack of having a bench, even though KCP can come up in spots where he can end up giving you shots, I see this as a 6-game series as well. And I think Denver is very much going to test the offense of Phoenix, because right now, you can't just go into a night at home and get absolutely hosed. That's That's uncalled for. And I think that's why I'm taking the gamble with the Suns. But I think the Nuggets honestly get their number, and they're going to face off against the Thunder in the conference final. Now, for Boston and the Magic, love the Magic. I think they're a very, very good team to move forward for the next few years, but they are young. Not a whole lot of juice. I think the Celtics end up making it through in 6 games. And I think the Celtics really do kind of move into cruise control. They start to build themselves up. And I think in the end, Celtics end up moving past them, and they go into the Eastern Conference Final. Now, the Pacers and the Sixers is going to be an interesting one because, honestly, for the great bench that the Pacers have, the Sixers, as far as quality players you have out on that floor and out on that starting 5, that's what's going to be important for the Sixers moving forward. And honestly, it'll be a tussle for 7 games, but I think the Sixers survive. They make it into the Eastern Conference Final, and this is where they're going to have their bout against the Boston Celtics. So I got Thunder Nuggets, and Sixers and the Celtics. So here we go now with our potential NBA Finals matchup. And as shown, I kind of anticipate this. The Thunder are a real good young team, and they are a team that's making a statement that they are going to be a threat for the next 5 years, and they should be. However, in a 7-game series like this, with the coaching of Mike Malone as far as experience caliber, and for Jokic, who's fresh from winning a title, knows what it takes to win, Denver outlasts the Thunder in 6 games. Quality control of the ball, quality control of possession is what's going to be important moving forward, and I think that the Nuggets really do have that. They're putting a lot of physical play on the Thunder, but I think in the end, you got to give kudos to the Thunder for the season, and that's why I'm like, I think the Nuggets realize we're not going to have this for very, very long. We've got to stay consistent in any and every way possible that we can. And that's where I look at the Eastern Conference now with the Celtics and the Sixers. The Celtics, like I said, they're in cruise control. The Sixers are kind of beaten up because they went into that 7-game bout against the Pacers. I think the Celtics really make it in 6 games. And this is where you have your most anticipated NBA Finals matchup between the Boston Celtics and the Denver Nuggets. And here's where I have the end result. My look as far as champion is going to be the Denver Nuggets. And I'm not saying this with as far as because I'm living in Denver, but I've watched this team several times. They play with a lot of leadership. They play with awful lot of grit and grind. And I think Mike Malone, he knows how to reinforce his players when they need to. And as far as for Jokic, now, the hardest part that could very much abolish this is unless if Jamal Murray gets hurt. That is the only thing, because that's where they become a little bit more one-dimensional. But I think, honestly, because of all of that, they found ways to try to cope with it. They find ways to basically overcome that. So I think the Denver Nuggets, for as damn good of a team that they are, they take this series by 6 because in the end, love Boston, love Jason Tatum, and I love Jaylen Brown and the rest of that roster. But this is where you have got to make those clutch shots count and matter more. I don't honestly think they've got exactly that kind of taste to where they can. Love their roster and love where they're going, but I don't know what I got with Joe Mazzulla, to be honest. I mean, compared to Ime Udoka, I just think that this team, this was going to be cruise control throughout the entirety of the Eastern Conference, but this is as far as the Celtics go, and I have Denver repeating it as your 24 NBA champion. All right, so that's what you have, folks. I'm really excited about the play-in tournament because in the end, you're just going to start getting a lot of these teams that could very much shock you in many ways, but I think more and more of the adrenaline and more of the urgencies is starting to come up more, And even though the NBA has not been having such a great season themselves, they still managed to make the playoffs very, very entertaining and very, very well as well. So who knows? We'll see exactly how the NBA playoffs shape up. But as I've said before, when we do have those first rounds, I will have my top 10 NBA teams to give you a little bit more clarity, breaking it down and seeing a lot of those momentum shifts. But I think I'm very comfortable with my bracket up on this. I mean, anything could happen. I mean, I watch the Magic, I watch the Pacers, and then I ultimately watch the Thunder. It's definitely going to be a very interesting playoffs for sure. But I just think, are we going to be ready to basically get the big shift in the NBA? And I'm talking about with the Warriors and the Lakers. So it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out. All right. Appreciate everybody for joining us here tonight on the show. We've had great stuff. Great guest, John Chik from Locked On Rangers. Appreciate him for coming on by and sharing his thoughts with the Rangers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Really excited for the next days to come. This week, we got multiple other interviews to come. Bring up onto the show. Really excited about that. Like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell button to keep you up to date on future and past shows. Appreciate you guys for jumping on by. We'll see you guys in the next episode of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Have a great rest of your night. Enjoy the play-in tournament because I know I am. So definitely check it out. The NBA playoffs is finally among us. NHL playoffs starting off on the 18th. We are all for it and all geared up. So don't miss it here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, you guys. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care, everybody.